Hey, this is Mike from Mabel's Acres. We're a small farm in Chatham County, North Carolina, and today I want to show you how to build a duck waterer, or what I call a duck trough. To do this, we'll need a couple materials. One will be the trough itself, which is made from a window planter box. I got this one from Lowe's, I believe, for about $10. We'll need a float valve, and this one is a tank mountable float valve. I'll link it in the video description below. I picked this one up on Amazon for about $8. The action's pretty simple. The water comes in here, and this little downspout, you can kind of see it there, is where the water comes out. And then as the water level in the tank, or trough in this case, rises, this float pivots, floats up, and then it closes the valve. So you maintain a pretty constant or pretty consistent water level in the tank, so it doesn't go dry, but it also doesn't overfill. And then another piece of equipment, which I also picked up on Amazon, I'll link it below, is an adapter. This is, I believe, a half-inch male, and then this is your half-inch female, and it adapts this to a garden hose hookup. It's your regular standard garden hose. I do have some plumber's tape, and I tried this out earlier without the plumber's tape, and if the plumber's tape is not wrapped around the threads, it will leak at this pivot seam here. So this needs to be wrapped with plumber's tape. I also have a drill with a half-inch drill bit, and I did that earlier. I used it to drill this hole where we're going to put the apparatus into the trough. The bit itself, you can kind of see, is actually smaller than the hole. So what I did, I drilled the half-inch hole, and then I kept this turned on and kind of put pressure on the sides and just expanded the hole. And I tried to fit this in there, expanded it some more, until it fit pretty snugly. What you can also do with this hole, you don't necessarily need to use a drill bit. I have my Leatherman multi-tool, which is a good tool. I'll link that in the description below too. I use it like all the time. You could cut it out, or after you drill a pilot hole, what you could do is deploy a file, and this doesn't necessarily have to be on a multi-tool, but you can kind of just file around the edges. That'll work. And even if you don't have a drill, you could start your pilot hole with a knife or something like that. But I wanted to highlight on this Leatherman multi-tool, the one I have is the Wingman edition. It has this tool called a package opener, which I rarely use. If I open packages, it's usually with the knife. But this package opener is actually pretty good for scraping and cutting this plastic. And I use that to kind of just trim up the edges, remove all the, well, not all, but remove most of the extraneous plastic and all that. So if you have a Leatherman multi-tool and it has the package opener, it's actually pretty good for expanding these holes in plastic. But that said, you could easily do this with a pocket knife and an awl and a file, something like that. But I just used the drill and then trimmed it up with a file and that package opener from the Leatherman. Anyway, that said, so we have the trough here, and I would recommend this for adult ducks or ducks that are getting larger. Chickens could actually even use this too, but again, I would recommend grown-up chickens, because the depth here is such that right now our ducks are kind of younger. They're 3 weeks old, so they like to get in here and swim instead of just drink. And that's okay as long as it's not too cold, and I kind of like to keep an eye on them when they're swimming, because it's so fun to a duck to swim, but they can get cold, and that can be not good for them. If they stay wet overnight and it's cold, it can really hurt them. So this is kind of for the future. When the ducks maybe are 6, 8, 10 weeks old, I'll put this as their main waterer. Right now we're just using a regular water that I manually refill, but this one should be automatic when it's complete, so that will help. Anyway, so what I'm going to do next is insert this into the trough, wrap it with the plumber's tape, and attach this coupling. And then I'll show you how that connects to a garden hose and kind of show off the functionality of this. Now, one thing that's important here is to be sure you align this correctly. So you want the float, when it pivots up, to shut down the valve, instead of, if it's like this, it would pivot up and open up the valve. So you'd have either a tank that was running all the time or a tank that wouldn't fill at all, depending on if this was floating or not. So the correct way for it to be aligned is this way. So in this position it would be filling, and then this position it would be off. So what I'm going to do is just insert this through that hole. There we go. Okay, I have it wrapped in plumber's tape. And one thing I'd like to point out here is there is kind of a gap around this hole that I kind of roughly cut out with the drill and the file. What I would suggest here, it's pretty much necessary, otherwise you'll have a leak, is caulk this up with 100% silicone, and I'll show that later. But the next step to do here is to just attach this fitting. Just screw that right in. Make sure the threads align so you don't strip them. This metal on plastic can lead to stripping pretty easily, and it really just needs to be hand tight, and there will be some excess here, but at this point you can test it out if you'd like. You take a garden hose and screw this in here and turn on the water and make sure it works as expected. Alright, here's the coupling with silicone attached. I let it cure overnight, and this should make a waterproof seal and also kind of hold everything in place a little bit better. Alright, and attaching the hose is pretty simple. Just get your garden hose and screw it in like any other attachment. Make sure it's finger tight. I'm going to turn on the water here. And as you can see, it's filling. There's not really any leaks on this side. It's filling on this side. Alright, and when the float valve starts to float, the valve becomes closed. And at this point, the ducks could come in, drink some water, say empty it down a little, and then we would fill right back up.